This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Somali president rolls back plans to extend term. What next for the country? Calm returns to Chad's capital after deadly protests against military rule. And the UN to redistribute COVID-19 vaccine doses from the DRC before they expire. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and with me with the business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Mango Airlines in South Africa forced to suspend operations over unpaid bills. And Uganda considers a debt suspension in its economic recovery plan. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. Now we begin in South Africa, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has acknowledged corruption in the previous government. He said the governing ANC party could and should have done more to prevent corruption under his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. Ramaphosa's admission came when he appeared before a graft inquiry on Wednesday. The commission is looking into state capture allegations during former President Zuma's 9-year tenure. Ramaphosa served as deputy president in that government. His appearance before the commission is a rare moment for a sitting head of state and focuses on brothers Atul, AJ and Rajesh Gupta, who are said to have influenced policy to win lucrative government contracts.
We must acknowledge that the issue of state capture was a matter of great political contestation within the ANC. Differences over whether indeed state capture existed, its extent and form, and what should be done about it contributed to divisions within the National Executive Committee and other ANC structures. It is worth mentioning that one of the earliest claims made within ANC structures of the possibility that members of the Gupta family may have had an improper role in the functioning of the executive.
In Somalia, a car bomb targeting prison officers has left at least 3 people dead in the capital, Mogadishu. 7 others have been injured. The custodial quarrel complex has also been damaged. No group or individual has claimed responsibility for that attack. The attack comes against the backdrop of political turmoil in the country following President Mohamed Farmajo's attempt to extend his term by 2 years. On Tuesday, however, President Farmajo called for elections after clashes split security forces along clan lines in the capital, Mogadishu. The president is due to meet with legislators on Saturday to discuss the way forward.
The federal government of Somalia has always believed and still sees dialogue, compromise, negotiation and the return to the discussion table as the only viable options, while honoring the September 17, 2020 agreement and the recommendations of the Baidoa Technical Committee. I hereby call upon all the signatories of the September 17th agreement to come together immediately for urgent discussions on the unconditional implementation of the above-mentioned agreement. Finally, I urge all security agencies to maintain the stability of the capital and the safety of innocent civilians, avoiding any actions that may lead to insecurity. I also urge the Somali people to support the armed forces in this regard.
Earlier, we spoke to a security expert, Dr. Mustafa Ali, who is also the CEO of Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, to give us more perspective on the unfolding events in Somalia.
The only option that Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has is to return the country back to the path of constitutionalism. Remember, he is in office unconstitutionally after his term in office ended in February. The lower house that extended his term of office, its own term of office actually ended in December of last year. So all those acts of parliament and the term extension are unconstitutional according to the Somali's federal constitution. And the option that we see is for Farmajo to return back to constitutionalism. The one man, one vote election is desirable. However, the Somali community, the state itself, the political parties and politicians are not ready for one man, one vote in Somalia. There is still no stability. Al-Shabaab is still controlling large swaths of territory in Somalia, and it's unthinkable that the one man, one vote is going to take place at this point. What the September 17 agreement basically says is that the country is not ready for one man, one vote, and therefore in the interim, they should conduct the indirect elections to legitimize those that are in office or will come to office for another 4 years, within then which time Somalia can prepare for the one man, one vote elections. Somalia's problems are much, much deeper than the current electoral disputes. The elections in and of itself is not going to end Somalia's problems. What a credible elections will do is to accord or offer legitimacy to those that will be leading Somalia, who then will have to work very hard, bring the clans together, and to build credible institutions, the Somali National Army, Parliament, the executive, judiciary, and all other institutions. Once those are then built, then there will be more stability. And this clanism is something that Somalia will have to deal with and build a coherent, an ideologically coherent force that is going to secure the country and then start resolving the issues, starting with Al-Shabaab, bring back security, and then organize for a one man, one vote elections in the near future.
The government of Ireland has confirmed that an Irish citizen was among those killed by unidentified gunmen in Burkina Faso. Wildlife NGO founder Rory Young was killed alongside 2 Spanish journalists in an ambush. The 3 foreigners were part of a convoy of security forces, forest rangers and journalists when they were attacked. They were reported missing on Monday. The Irish Foreign Ministry says they have been in contact with Young's family. At the time of the attack, Young was leading a wildlife protection patrol in Burkina Faso's Ali National Park. Chengeta Wildlife said in a statement the 2 journalists on the patrol were documenting Young's efforts to protect wildlife. No one has yet taken responsibility for the attack. The government has described the attackers as terrorists. Nigerian lawmakers have asked that President Muhammadu Buhari declare a state of emergency in the country. This is as a result of heightened insecurity challenges in different parts of the country, from kidnappings, insurgent attacks and banditry. Our correspondent Phili Haza reports from Abuja.
The House of Representatives made the call for a state of emergency after concluding plenary on Tuesday in Abuja. They warned that the security crisis has worsened. The lower house of the National Assembly also resolved to summon the country's heads of security to brief them on the current efforts to curb the kidnappings and attacks on lives and properties. Similarly, members of the legislature's upper chamber, the Senate, are scheduled to meet with President Buhari soon to deliberate more on these security issues. There's been an uptick in attacks by unknown criminals, including the kidnapping of students and other citizens, while suspected members of Boko Haram insurgents have attacked several parts of the country's north. About 80 people have reportedly been killed and at least 60 more kidnapped across the country in the past 1 week alone. Since December, 6 schools, mainly in the north, have been attacked, and many students have yet to be rescued from the hands of kidnappers. Meanwhile, in a virtual meeting held on Tuesday with the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, President Muhammadu Buhari urged the U.S. to relocate its Africa Command from Germany to Africa. The president did not indicate if Nigeria was offered as a headquarters for the command, but there were calls for the U.S. to do more to assist Nigeria and West Africa in tackling the worsening security crisis in the region. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Tensions remain high in Chad, even as streets remained empty on Wednesday. This is a stark contrast from Tuesday's violent protests in which 2 people were killed and 27 others wounded. Opposition groups have, however, called for more protests. Activists opposed to the current transitional government, headed by the military, have been calling for a civilian government. The governing military council appointed Mahamat Idris Deby to lead a transitional government after the death of his father, President Idris Deby, last week. The new leader has called for unity amid a mounting opposition.
Each and every one of us must simply understand that all action, attitude and behavior that is contrary to national unity and to our living together in peace is a serious assault on the nation.
We're in a country where human dignity is flouted and we have had enough. We have suffered a lot and now it's enough. We want the military power to leave and to let us choose our leaders freely. We are not puppets. We are tired.
And joining us to discuss the situation in Chad is Paul Melly, Consulting Fellow for the Africa Programme at Chatham House. He joins us via Zoom from London. Paul, thank you for your time this evening. Is the opposition likely to accept the new military ruler's call for national dialogue, considering the entrenched political polarization?
That's the big question of the moment, because the father of the current interim regime leader, so the late President Idris Deby, took a pretty harsh line with the opposition. People were often imprisoned, they were intimidated. Opposition parties, some of them had a few seats in parliament, but it wasn't a real democracy. They were basically shut out and their views were marginalized. And as a result, there's a huge trust deficit. And how the interim regime manages to convince the opposition that it is worth really buying into the transition, that there is a real prospect of some sort of move to a genuinely more democratic, more participatory political system, that's the big open question. And it's not really clear yet what the answer will be. In the aftermath of President Deby's funeral, when a number of regional leaders and of course President Macron from France were in N'Djamena, the Chadian capital, they did talk to quite a wide range of political actors in the hope of launching some sort of dialogue that would really get everybody to buy into a transition process. But the opposition are being cautious. When the new prime minister was appointed, quite a few other opposition people felt that he'd, as it were, sold out. On the other hand, he may be the sort of middling figure, somebody who both the old guard, if you like, the incumbent political structure and the opposition would be prepared to talk to. But there is a lot of trust to be rebuilt. We don't yet know how far the transition can succeed.
And that brings me to my next question, Paul, because Deby left behind a huge political void. Can his successors and opposition effectively fill it, including holding the country together?
It's not totally impossible. Chad's past history doesn't offer very encouraging portents, because even before Deby came to power, which was 30 years ago, through force, of course, Chad had suffered a series of internal conflicts. And all the time he was in power, repeatedly there were rebellions. So that would lead one to have a rather pessimistic view. On the other hand, Africa, particularly West Africa and West Central Africa, has been seeing significant change. Many of the countries to the west of Chad are now functioning democracies. There's a much more participatory political culture in the region. And we have the example of Mali, where in very different circumstances, soldiers deposed the civilian president in August, and within a very few weeks, under pressure from surrounding West African countries, agreed to a transition back to democratic elections next year. And it looks as if some of the other countries in the Sahel and France are hoping that Chad can be nudged down that path. And it may be, it's just a small possibility, but it may be that it's possible to persuade Chadians that now at last is the moment that a more consensual, a more inclusive and democratic system can be made to work. Whereas Deby himself, the late President Deby, was such an overwhelmingly dominant figure, symbolized, for example, by the fact that he took the title of Field Marshal shortly before the last election, that people didn't have much trust. They felt that they were being pushed out and excluded. The opposition were being pushed further to margins. But without his huge personality there, it may be that the military, who are currently temporarily in control, feel that they don't have that same clout, and that Deby's own son doesn't have quite the same profile and clout, that the old system couldn't be continued without the big man who dominated it. And so it's just possible that we will move towards something a bit more inclusive. How far it goes towards genuine democracy, we really can't tell at the moment, because, of course, there were a lot of people who had a stake in the old system, and working out how to, as it were, placate those vested interests while yet reaching out to wider sections of the population, for example, in the south of Chad, who've really been shut out of the political process in recent years, will be a tough challenge.
All right, Paul, we appreciate those insights. Thank you very much for joining us. Paul Melly, live for us from London. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. The UN to redistribute COVID-19 vaccine doses from the DRC before they expire. And Uganda threatens to shut out refugees unless the WFP buys relief food from local farmers.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I believe we only need a tool to bring change. And this tool, to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na waizi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundime si kama kitambo.
The Ethiopian government says the UN Security Council has taken a fair stance on the situation in northern Ethiopia. Last week, the Security Council acknowledged the efforts by the government to provide humanitarian assistance in Tigray. However, it still expressed concern over the ongoing humanitarian situation. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more on that story.
Since the end of what the government called a law enforcement mission, Ethiopia has expressed its unhappiness with how the UN Security Council looks at the situation in Tigray. The country even said some parties are violating its sovereign rights by meddling in internal affairs. Now, Ethiopian government seems to be changing its stance.
The UN Security Council statement from last week has recognized Ethiopia's relief efforts in Tigray. That has all demolished the accusations by some who say the government's doing nothing. The Security Council has said any solution must respect Ethiopia's sovereignty. That is commendable.
According to the Foreign Ministry official, Ethiopia remains committed to addressing the humanitarian situation in Tigray, and the work done to make the region secure has hugely paid off.
The UN Security Council has asked 8 organizations to increase their relief service through respect for human rights. And the fact that the Council has emphasized the need for acknowledging Ethiopia's national unity, freedom and law has finally brought our truth to the front. And this has changed the unbalanced thoughts kept by some parties about the country.
Months after the end of the war in Tigray, most of the wanted former leaders of the region remain at large. The Ethiopian National Defense Force believe it will finish the job sooner than later. TPLF leaders, on the other hand, promise victory over the ENDF. Grumchara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Uganda has threatened to close its doors to refugees unless the World Food Programme buys its supplies from local farmers. This comes at a time when the UN Food Agency says it desperately needs over $200 million to properly feed over 1 million refugees in Uganda. Here's Leon Senyange with more.
Mealtime at this refugee camp in mid-western Uganda. The rush is for this maize meal and beans. It is what the refugees here eat daily. Most of it is imported. Now, Uganda is demanding that the UN World Food Programme buys food from its farmers to feed these refugees.
We are going to cause no procurement of food from outside Uganda by the World Food Programme. Let the money remain here. Our farmers have there are a lot of food around here. Cereals are there.
The World Food Programme, however, says it purchased over 110 metric tons of locally produced food in 2020. But there are concerns over Uganda's capacity to meet food standards.
One of the issues to tackle there, Honourable Minister, is the issue of the poor quality of post-harvest handling. This is the only reason why, despite investing for several years, we have not been able to purchase locally in Uganda.
Last March, Kenya banned the importation of Uganda's maize flour over safety concerns. The food crisis is growing, with the World Food Programme struggling to provide food for the refugees. Last December, the food agency was forced to cut its rations by 40%.
When we do not have the needed resources to provide the food that refugees require to feed them on every single day, we are forced to apply ration cuts. The ration cuts are applied in a way that still allow us to provide sufficient energy and calories to keep and sustain lives. And this is the primary focus of that. So as we go forward, depending on the funding situation, you will see ration cuts going up and down.
The World Food Programme says it requires $221 million to end the cuts to more than 1.2 million refugees who rely on assistance to meet their daily food needs. The continuing growth of displaced populations in Uganda is driving an increase in the demand for food. And with limited supply, small-scale farming interventions that encourage the production of vegetables and staple foods are being promoted in the settlements, at least until when the UN Food Agency can fully restore the full rations. Leon Sonyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The United Nations Children's Fund says it will take 1.3 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines from the Democratic Republic of Congo and redistribute them to other African countries. This is aimed at preventing the doses from expiring before use. The AstraZeneca vaccines are set to expire on the 24th of June. The DRC government requested that the UN agency redistribute them following low vaccination uptake in the country. CGTN's Christo Chamringa has more.
The DRC's COVID-19 vaccination campaign was launched on the 19th of April in the capital, Kinshasa. But it got off to a shaky start because of widespread skepticism from locals.
We don't want that vaccine. That's why we're asking our government to help us. They should stop using it to vaccinate people.
Just over 2,000 people have received the AstraZeneca vaccine in the DRC out of a population of 86 million. The government has therefore asked UNICEF to take the vaccines to other African countries to ensure they're used before they expire in June.
These are 1.3 million doses of AstraZeneca, which are about to be shipped at the request of the DRC government 2 countries from the region here, and it's going to happen in the coming days, if not hours.
6 countries are set to receive the vaccines, including Ghana, Senegal, and Togo. The decision to redistribute the vaccines has been well received by some Congolese citizens.
Let them take those vaccines to other countries so that we remain at peace. I don't care whether they expire or not. Let them just send them elsewhere.
The government has now embarked on countering misinformation about the vaccines to ensure more people take the shots when the second batch is rolled out later this year.
We are going to put in a lot of effort to fight the rumors spread about COVID-19 vaccines by working closely with the media.
The DRC received the vaccines from the COVAX facility in early March. The facility is a global initiative that seeks to provide equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. The DRC government has decided to send more than 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccines to other African countries in need of them because it delayed its vaccination rollout. The vaccination was postponed in mid-March after several European countries suspended the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine over blood clot fears. Authorities now hope more people will accept to take the jab next time. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
South Africa has resumed its phase 1 rollout of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. The study being conducted on healthcare workers was halted for 2 weeks after dangerous clotting was found in 6 U.S. patients. Close to 300,000 medical staff have received the jab with no reports of clotting, and the program was allowed to resume. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Healthcare workers in South Africa eagerly pitched up as the vaccine rollout resumed. Johannesburg's Charlotte Makeke Hospital is one of 95 sites which had to quickly prepare for the restart.
It looks like, someone's coming here to get a jab, but there's just so many things that you need to coordinate. There's IT involved, everything is digital, everything is electronic. There's social distancing measures you have to put in. Transportation of the vaccines needs to be special transport. Storing of the vaccines, but we managed to do that over the past few days.
The facility overcame a few staffing challenges after the main hospital was closed due to a fire over a week ago. But there was much excitement as the first jabs were administered.
I'm so happy to have my vaccine. I'm very, very happy. I didn't even feel it when they were vaccinating me. So I'm very happy. Finally have my vaccine, so I'm happy.
Quite relieved and quite happy about it. It has been quite a wait till everything halted for a little while, but everything seems to be working quite efficiently now. And the process was very quick, and I'm happy. And I'll just wait for the few weeks, and then everything should be good.
Over 200,000 healthcare workers will be vaccinated over the next 2 weeks, 8,000 of them at this hospital alone, with strict new measures in place.
We're now no longer vaccinating any breastfeeding women. Pregnant women are still excluded. And we're giving much more safety information, both pre-vaccination and post-vaccination, with a couple of extra questions specifically around clotting disorders, which is what we then decide whether that particular patient should be getting vaccinated or not.
Recipients are fully briefed before and after receiving their shots, but there's little concern around the risks.
The team here, they were very helpful and user-friendly, and they explained everything, the side effects, how you, if you feel a headache or tired, what to do. They even gave us the contact numbers. What I can say to people outside, because I know there's a lot of talks going around regarding the vaccine, please get vaccinated.
I'm feeling more relaxed now because I was very anxious when they stopped the vaccine. They did explain about the side effect, and I'm happy because I understand most of the treatment that you are getting, they do have side effects. So there's no treatment that you cannot have side effects, but it depends from individual, how we respond to the treatment.
There was much relief as the vaccination process got underway again. South Africa will be hoping there will be no further hiccups as it prepares to widen its rollout for the elderly and the vulnerable. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A new study is linking severe COVID-19 symptoms and a higher risk of death to physical inactivity. According to the UK study, with nearly 50,000 participants, people who had sedentary lifestyles before the pandemic were more likely to be hospitalized. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
Towards the end of last year, I noticed I'd gained a lot of weight. I was not exercising and I was not eating properly. Sometime in December, I bumped into a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he was concerned at my weight gain, and he told me I needed to do something about it. So I began exercising. I started this weekly 10-kilometer runs, and within no time, I lost all the weight I had gained. But apart from that as well, I began eating healthy. In early March, when I got infected with COVID-19, I didn't really struggle with it. I realized I was luckier than most. A lot of people have suffered. For me, the biggest challenge was actually more psychological. A recent study published by the British Journal of Sports Medicine suggests that people physically inactive for at least 2 years before the pandemic were likely to have severe COVID-19 symptoms and a higher risk of death. The study says those with a sedentary lifestyle are 20% more likely to be admitted to hospital, 10% more likely to require intensive care, and 32% more likely to die.
Exercise and staying fit and losing weight and that sort of thing is generally very beneficial in fighting off all manner of illnesses. So the fact that it occurs also in the COVID situation is not surprising.
Dr. Tasso says regular exercise is important for those suffering from underlying conditions.
COVID is particularly virulent among patients with diabetes and who are overweight or who have hypertension. It's in those comorbidities that exercise has an important effect.
That message appears to have resonated with Kenyans, with many taking up some form of daily activity to keep fit during the pandemic.
Many people are flocking fitness stores to get equipment and stuff like that, but what they don't know is like you can just work out with your environment.
As for me, I don't know if keeping fit helped me avoid getting seriously ill, but I'm still running, not just to keep physically fit, but mentally too. Robert Magila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Time now for the day's business news. Let's cross over to Ucha for the latest.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Mango Airlines in South Africa forced to suspend operations over unpaid bills. And Uganda considers debt suspension in its economic recovery plan.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's low-cost carrier, Mango Airlines, has grounded all flights and suspended services ahead of schedule. Now, the accelerated demise of the airline looks to be in full swing after a whole host of flights were either delayed significantly or cancelled. The company has also scrapped all flight bookings from May onwards, and it now looks as if fulfilling its obligations will prove to be a significant challenge.
SAA grounded operations over a year ago when the country went into lockdown. It hasn't been able to fly since, even when lockdown restrictions eased. The airline's business rescue process has dragged on for over a year, and still there is not enough money. This is starting to impact Mango, which is 100% owned by South African Airways.
I can confirm that Mango, together with its board, are in sensitive discussions with the shareholder on the delayed funding, including the future of Mango. I can also confirm that we are yet to receive funding And once a decision has been reached on funding, we will communicate that accordingly to the public. Also that we're operating normally as we speak, and any decision on the future of Mango, etc., should be made public in due course.
It's a grim trajectory for an airline that has been running successfully for 15 years. But COVID restrictions on air travel has left most airlines struggling to stay in the air.
I don't think that there will be a quick solution unless somebody provides a loan based on government guarantees to bail it out for a little while. But otherwise, I think the airline won't be able to continue operations as the aircraft will actually be grounded.
Earlier this year, government committed a further $733 million to SAA. $180 million of that was meant for SAA subsidiaries. Most of the money has been dispersed to SAA, but there's been a delay in funding for its subsidiaries because of an amended appropriations bill that needs to be proclaimed into law. This means that Mango could only get money by June.
They still have an option to lease in aircraft, but it depends on whether those suppliers would be willing to risk not getting paid, So it is probable that the airline would not be able to continue operating from the 1st of May onwards.
If nothing comes through in the next few days, Mango may suspend operations for a few months until it is able to fly again. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Uganda is considering approaching its creditors to suspend the country's loan repayments until the economy recovers. Last year, the government took up large loans from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund and other financiers to fund key priority sectors hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. But economic experts warn that Uganda may fail to meet its debt obligations, and that's if it continues to borrow. Here's CGTN's Michael Baleke with more.
Uganda has been borrowing heavily to fund COVID-19 related expenditure and also cover revenue shortfalls. The country's total public debt reached $18 billion by December 2020, a 35% rise from the previous year. The amount, according to economists, is likely to surpass the 50% threshold in the next financial year.
Government needs to bring this under control because and the easiest way to do this is to cut down on expenditure. Initially, government this year had proposed a budget of 41 trillion. Now it's gone back to 45 trillion. Okay, why? Because some people are willing to lend us money.
Uganda is using borrowed money to finance its ambitious infrastructure program to construct roads, dams and investments in oil and gas. The government is now considering dialogue with its large creditors like China, the IMF and World Bank to negotiate a new loan repayment schedule.
Now this is a very bad signal to lenders. Lenders want to be sure, because this is sovereign debt, they want to be sure that you'll come through when your obligations are due. Okay? Now if we start negotiating, start rescheduling, it means we'll become an unreliable borrower.
In this financial year, the country plans to use 20% of its total tax collections to pay interest rates on its public debt. Uganda, like many African countries, is struggling to revive its economy following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the slow rollout of vaccines is creating more uncertainty, and the World Health Organization says this could prolong the pandemic. Uganda has reported more than 40,000 cases of COVID-19 and about 330 deaths. The country has administered at least 270,000 doses of vaccines so far, a move that has driven the government to ease pandemic restrictions on trade, transport, and other key economic activities.
The economy is picking up, and I see signs, very clear signs. I hope COVID does not now turn around again to come and dump us.
Uganda recently signed oil and gas agreements that will see the country build a $3.5 billion oil export pipeline from Hoima in the west to the Indian Ocean Tanga port in Tanzania. The agreements are expected to unlock more than $10 billion worth of investments into the economy, which the government believes will help it to pay off its rising debt. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And the Central Bank of Egypt has allowed banks to issue electronic currencies that will be subject to its supervision. Each coin in the mobile payment service will be equal to one Egyptian pound. Now, CGTN's Yasser Kim reports the Apex Bank has already warned financial institutions against the use of cryptocurrencies, which it views as high risk.
The issuance of the electronic currencies is the first of its kind in Egypt. 1 unit of the new electronic currency is to have the value of 1 Egyptian pound and is to be used via the mobile wallet and service providers.
The state and central bank policies are aimed at achieving financial inclusion and digital transformation, as well as to transform the society into a cashless economy. It protects the different sides of any transaction, whether consumers or traders. This system will help merge the informal economy with the formal economy, as all transactions will be monitored by banks and so will naturally increase the tax revenue for the state.
The central bank has stepped up its drive for digital transformation in the last few years, encouraging Egyptians to part way with cash and log online.
Electronic currencies are going to be the trend and an alternative to the paper notes and coins. It's a good idea, especially that the central bank can control the transactions, making it easier and safer to use.
The Bitcoin or virtual and electronic currencies are the future. The Bitcoin or cryptos are volatile. To have a currency monitored by the central bank will create stability, which is important for us.
But is the introduction of the electronic currency a step towards issuing cryptocurrencies, which the central bank has strongly rejected?
There's a difference between the electronic currency and cryptocurrency. The electronic currency is issued against an actual amount of money in the person's bank account, unlike the cryptocurrency that doesn't have any financial control, no base or form to protect the currency owner, nor to monitor illegal transactions.
There will be a limit on issuing electronic units for each person. However, the e-currency can be exchanged into Egyptian pound. Achieving financial inclusion and digital transformation will elevate Egypt in the world rankings and ratings of the international markets and will help improve the climate for business in Egypt. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only impacted businesses negatively, it has also forced people to cut down on spending as well. In Nigeria, the country's Statistics Bureau says total household consumption dropped from $283.5 billion in 2019 to $279.3 billion in 2020. Now, the drop means Nigerians spent less, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and recession last year. CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit Nigeria, Simisola Adigun shops here at her favorite supermarket every weekend. But now, she manages to do so just once a month, only picking up the most essential items she needs. Shopping as she used to know it has changed.
I used to have to spend for my family upkeep. I could spend as much as 80,000, to at least to an extent take care of family items for the month. But now it's either I make do with what I have initially or I have to add more. Either way, it's taking a lot of getting used to. The items I used to buy for, say, 500 naira, 1,000 naira has skyrocketed by 100%, even more. So now you have to manage what you have, the income that you have. The purchasing power has reduced.
Adigun is not the only one who has been forced to cut down on her consumption level. The National Bureau of Statistics' latest report on Nigerian gross domestic product shows household consumption declined by over $4 billion between 2019 and 2020.
And what that means is that the effect of COVID-19, as it were, in 2020, had hit deep on the consumption power of many Nigerians. This is following the disruption that came with COVID, which led to so many economic activity being halted and led to so many companies sacking a number of their staff or resizing their employee size, to the extent that it led to wage cut and all of that, that actually translated to reduction in income for most of Nigerians, which eventually translated to reduction in the general consumption.
With skyrocketing prices, a monthly inflation surge and depreciation of the naira, consumers like Adigun are having to implement major lifestyle changes in order to cope.
It's my needs over my wants now. I have to consider the things I really need over the things I want, you know. And of course, even your needs, some take more priority than others. So I have to be watchful about the things that I need.
Nigeria is battling a galloping inflation, which is currently at 18.17%. Food inflation is even worse at 22.95%, and mainly blamed on insecurity in parts of the country. The government says it is doing everything to revive the economy. It's come up with various schemes aimed at boosting consumption. One of them is the central bank's COVID-19 stimulus package for households and small businesses.
We should look at possibility of even doing more, creating more loans through our targeted credit facilities for our households and small businesses particularly that were adversely impacted by COVID. Knowing fully well that when we support this household and medium and small enterprises, what that will result is that it will stimulate consumption spending that will ultimately lead to aggregate demand and then bolster our gross domestic product.
Adigun says she hasn't applied for the CBN stimulus just yet, preferring to manage with what she earns for now. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, the family of deceased Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Kun-hee says it will pay more than $10.8 billion in inheritance taxes for the estate of the late patriarch. It also adds that it will donate his vast private art collection to state curators. Lee, who is credited with transforming Samsung into the world's largest smartphone and memory chip maker, died on October 25th last year. His estate was valued at about $23.4 billion. The inheritance tax bill is one of the largest ever in South Korea and globally. It has been closely watched as it could have resulted in the dilution of the family's controlling stake in Samsung.
Family members of the late chairman Lee Kun-hee said in a press release on inheritance that they would donate about 23,000 cultural assets and artworks to the country. As Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, I highly appreciate and express deep gratitude for the family who followed the deceased's wishes of sharing his love of our cultural assets and artworks with the people.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the governing party under the country's former president, Jacob Zuma, could and should have done more to prevent corruption. We'll have more details on his testimony at a graft inquiry earlier on Wednesday. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Peninah.
Uche, you're watching Africa Live. Plenty more coming up, including this. Top African streaming platform focuses on local productions.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
On online streaming platform Showmax is investing in production of its own local content for African audiences. Showmax is competing against Netflix for audience attention on the continent. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma reports.
Different kinds of justice.
Online content meant to capture the attention of audiences in Africa.
She contacted me. Akisema she had a story to tell that would shock the city.
For us, it really is about getting the local entertainment, which we know our African audiences enjoy, programming in their languages, stories reflecting their realities, their hopes and their dreams, making that as widely available as possible. And for that reason, we now look at mobile subscriptions as well as the regular lean back.
MultiChoice is Africa's largest pay TV group. It is available in 50 African countries. Its streaming service, Showmax, was launched in 2015 and is available in 46 African countries. The company is focused on developing productions set in its biggest markets of Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa.
I think people have far more power to influence and to make sure that people who are relying on others, to pay subscriptions or to bring their eyeballs to your platforms, that you listen to what they are telling you, because there is so much choice out there now. If you don't listen to your customers and if you are not reflecting their realities and providing solutions for them, they simply have hundreds and hundreds of other places where they can take their eyeballs or their wallets.
The company released 6 new original productions in 2020. Of this, one was a reality TV series from Nigeria and another police procedural drama set in Kenya.
They know that the stories that we are telling from our own backyard will find global audiences, and for me that's a wonderful reality.
Broadcasters on the African continent are under huge pressure to keep viewers engaged. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And ahead in sports.